This morning, a settlement with the American Disabilities Association after allegations that wheelchair-accessible seats at Red Rocks cost more than non-accessible seating. Red Rocks agreed to set aside nearly $48,000 for the 1,800 people that were overcharged for these ADA seats at the amphitheater. Joining me now is 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor. Thank you for coming in.
Sure thing. Good to be here.
This is interesting. So the facts of this really are, go over the terms in the settlement because it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so what happened was the Red Rocks only has wheelchair accessible seats in the first and last row. And so what was happening was under the ADA, essentially you have to offer wheelchair accessible seats at every level, and they weren't. And so that ultimately resulted in folks paying more than sometimes $130 more than the regular seats. And so they went, they had the DOJ initiated a complaint. They ultimately resolved it where Red Rocks is paying back those folks almost $50,000. And then there's also the promoters. They also paid a civil penalty. So this is to pay them back. And Red Rocks said going forward, we're going to charge for the wheelchair accessible seats the lowest price just to avoid any issue at all. It's the lowest price ticket.
How were able-bodied people allowed to buy the ADA seats? Was there no, you didn't have to upload anything?
That's a great question, and that actually was what led to a lawsuit in 2016. There was a class action lawsuit about that because what people were doing when they went to buy the ticket, they'd say, yeah, I'm disabled. They'd buy the ticket, show up, they're not disabled, and so you had this front row designed for wheelchair mobility, and you got all these able-bodied people sitting in the front row. And so then when the people came in the wheelchairs, they had to ultimately go to the very last row. And so that lawsuit also ended up in a settlement in 2018 where Red Rocks ended up now saying, if you buy the ticket, you have to show up with the same credit card and the ID. Somebody in your group has to need the actual seats, and then you have to come as a group with all your tickets. So they did that to avoid people, now buying those front row seats that don't need the wheelchair accessibility.
So when this happened, they weren't going down to the people who bought these seats and asking them, are you ADA? Are you, they were just kind of letting them be down there. That's
exactly right. And there was actual footage of, these people jamming to the concert, dancing and everything else. And they're in these, wheelchair accessible seats. So it was really, this is an exact reason why we have some of these laws, because everybody says, oh, the government's too much in our business and this kind of thing. Well, it's when people violate just sort of your basic kind of ethical, moral issues.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Right. I would feel super uncomfortable, jamming at the front row and seeing these folks who there's nowhere else to go. Literally, Red Rocks, because of its design, its natural structure, the only wheelchair accessible are the front and last row, literally.
Who would buy these seats that didn't need them? That is just shame.
Right.
Shame.
Exactly.
So this is a settlement, not a judgment. Is this like lessons have been learned kind of a thing moving forward?
Yes, I think it is. And that's actually why we wanted to highlight it. And so a settlement means, Red Rocks and the city and county of Denver, which owns Red Rocks, they're not admitting any liability. This was, they entered into this settlement voluntarily, but sometimes people settle because of the cost of litigation and all these other reasons. So I'm glad you asked that, because this doesn't mean that they've done anything wrong. They weren't proven to have done anything wrong, but they did voluntarily enter this settlement and make some changes in their policies. So that's a good thing.
Needed changes for sure. Whitney, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
It's always
Happy
good to
Friday.
be here. Happy Friday.